and it's very hard to change a relationship dynamic. That's much harder than to resolve an issue, or a specific fight.
I honestly think that's one of the most disrespectful things that I think
Yeah.
our wives can say.
It's emotional abuse, and it tears the relationship apart. It's a whole death by a thousand paper cuts.
I had a reaction to both of those things as you were saying them. When you
Yeah.
said, but you never do the dishes, like I immediately want to, there was a part of me that just wanted to fight. John Kim, where are you at, man?
I am in Ojai in my car because my house burned down, which is inconvenient for an author who's trying to promote his brand new book.
Oh my gosh. Like, so yeah, those of you guys watching us on YouTube, I mean, brother, my heart goes out to you, man. Like,
Thank you.
I'm glad you're safe though.
Yeah.
Like, but horrific, man.
Uh, yeah, it's blindsiding, right? It's traumatic. I got to focus on my nervous system and not getting into spinning thoughts and future tripping.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
also, it's weird, man. I have this strange feeling close to God, a reminder of what's important in life. When things like this happen and you get stripped of everything, it forces you to um, just be grateful that your child's alive, and
Yeah.
that the cup of coffee or air, or it's really interesting. And then also, man, the love and support I've been getting just online, social media, friends and family has been the vine that's been pulling me out of this quicksand.
My gosh, man. Well, I
So,
mean, you're in Ohio. Are you going to go hang out with Bernthal while you're there?
oh yeah, I'm at his house.
Are you
Just
really?
kidding. Just kidding.
I thought you were serious.
Um,
He's such a down to earth dude. I was like, oh, well, that kind of makes sense.
dude, I don't even know who that is. Who is that?
Oh, John Bernthal, he's the Punisher.
Oh, okay.
He
Yeah.
lives there in Ohio.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm actually at another celebrity's house. I just can't say his name, but
Okay.
he was gracious enough to offer his home, and I said, okay, you know what? I'm all about receiving, so we'll take it. So we're here for about 2 weeks.
Man, yeah. Well, whoever he or she is, I mean, that's very kind of them. So,
Oh, super
um,
kind.
you and I were jamming here before we got started, and poor guy, you're in your car, but I also know, like, you just launched this book called Break Up on Purpose, a catalyst for growth. And, we thought about punting the interview, but then again, we were just like, you know what? I also know what it's like when you're working with a publisher and they really want you to get the word out. So I
Yeah.
totally get it. But, you've been on the show before. I loved the first show that you were on. I think we're going back like, my gosh, maybe even 2 or 3 years ago. But
Yeah.
what was the catalyst to writing this book?
Yeah, it was my own divorce, like 17 years ago, and I left with nothing but a pillow. And it wasn't just a chapter of my life; it was an act break. And it's funny that I'm here in the car now because this is also an act break, right? Losing your house and everything. But the divorce was the biggest event in my life that repositioned me. I went back to school, became a therapist, found fitness, bought a motorcycle. I just had a huge connection to self because of an expired relationship. It was the first domino in my um, returning back to the village, if you will, as Joseph Campbell talks about.
Wow, man. And I know one of the things we're going to talk about here are some of the signals, and I
Yeah.
work with I work mostly with married men, and I work
Mm,
mostly with even though we're dad edge, right? We help men be better dads,
yeah.
but really like my superpower is helping men with their marriages and whatnot. But the signals I think are really fascinating to me of what emerges when someone is maybe on thinking about leaving. I actually want to ask you a question about this. I've heard the statistic for long as I can remember. I don't know if there's even really truth to it, but is that if a woman says out loud, hey, I think we should think about separation, or I think we should
Mm.
think about divorce, or I want to go separate ways, that she's been thinking about that for around 2 years. Is that true?
I don't know exactly about 2 years, but I think that's a fair statement in that. And of course, this is a generalization, but by the time a woman says, "Hey, I'm thinking about divorce," I think it's almost too late because from what I have experienced with mostly women, when they've made up their mind, or if they're like, it's hard for them to now. Because I feel like with women more than men, uh, tend to suppress or drift without really, um, like hitting that, breaking the glass and hitting the red button, and so I think with men, they could say, I'm thinking about divorce, but I still want to work on this. I think by the time a woman says, I'm thinking about divorce, I've already feel like they've made up their minds. It's been a while, like you said, 2 years or maybe a big chunk of time where they've been working through this and they're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've seen some turnarounds, but I've also noticed that when a woman says that, the work becomes way more in depth, a bit harder, a lot more
yeah,
arduous, like a lot of things going on. But I am curious, what are some of the signals that maybe are subtle to us as
yeah,
men, but we need
yeah.
to be picking up on them?
Yeah, and I want to give you something that maybe people haven't heard before, right? Because we always talk about red flags and signals, especially social media, a lot of tips. Um, for me, it's the relationship dynamic. I talk a lot about, especially men going from mouth to nipple, meaning instead of being a partner, the dynamic is more like mother son or
Yeah.
roommates. And this is, it's kind of like the frog in the boiling water, where the frog doesn't know because over time the water gets hotter, and the relationship dynamic, if we're not paying attention to it or we're not attuned to it, it can slowly change where people are drifting and feelings start changing, and then it's no more like intimate partners. It's, your partner kind of becomes your mom, or it's
Mm.
very subtle, right? Or because, and you're participating in the dynamic as well, you guys become siblings or roommates, and it's very hard to change a relationship dynamic. That's much harder than to, like, resolve an issue, or a specific fight, because the relationship dynamic is the engine that's underneath, that's driving the relationship. It's really hard when you start to see your partner as kind of a roommate to respark the chemistry. When you go from mouth to nipple, it's very hard to come back up to her mouth.
I've never heard that comparison before, but that makes a lot of sense. It makes
Yeah,
a lot of sense.
yeah,
For You mentioned in their dynamics, relationship dynamics. So, roommate obviously would be probably more of a dynamic, or her viewing you as a man child, right, would be a
right,
dynamic. Are there
right.
other are there other ones that we're not aware of?
The one that I went through, and of course, it's tied to our story and how we show up. I'm the youngest in sibling position, so I'm the one that can be a little bit reckless. I, never made my bed. I didn't know how to work a dishwasher, like so, a little bit failure to launch. So when I got into a relationship, and then married at 29, um, she started to take care of me. And she was someone who had to grow up fast, right? So there's also an attraction in that. I think in early young love, opposites attract. So if you have someone who had to grow up fast and was responsible, that person's probably going to end up with someone who's like irresponsible and a little bit reckless, And so over time, if you don't grow out of that, and you don't kind of match your partner as a partner, then you default to a dynamic. And so for me, it was kind of like mother son, right? And so I went from her mouth to her nipple. I also personally had no sense of self, no sense of purpose. I was lying with desperation, you know, and so there are other things outside the relationship as well that can get you to default into that kind of dynamic. But that's a big one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I can definitely see that. It drives me a little nuts, but when wives introduce their kids and husband to people, and she says something like, "These are my three kids. This is Ethan, Mason, Lawson, and this is my fourth child over here, who's my husband." Like,
Yeah.
I honestly think that's one of the most disrespectful things that I think
Yeah.
our wives can say, and I get the sense that the relationship probably is already in trouble.
Yeah. And I know you're saying it from kind of like she's joking, right?
Right.
But it's funny about jokes is there's usually truth to it, is why it's funny. And yeah, that's very telling. And I do think it's disrespectful. And I also think that it's cementing the problem. And you know what I'm saying? So like, if you say that and you believe that, the work for you is to kind of break that relationship pattern, and instead of saying he's my child, he should be my king and I'm his queen. You know what I'm saying? Like
Mm.
it's going to require effort. But if you get into the pattern of introducing your husband as your child, even though you're joking, yeah, there's something about that that's not only disrespectful, but you're cementing the problem. You're not doing anything about the problem.
It's almost like you're speaking it into the relationship, even as a
Yeah,
joke. You know what I mean?
right,
Yeah.
right, right. You're speaking it, and also, we as human beings, we kind of pull unconsciously, and so that's kind of telling of your beliefs, but also, yeah, the you're laying tracks for that.
Yeah. I totally
Yeah.
get that, man. I totally understand.
And then I gotta say, it's the dad's responsibility to also speak up, right?
Hmm.
So if your wife is saying that, and you don't have to be a dick about it, but after the bark, you say, "Hey, listen, I know you're joking. But it kind of hurts my feelings. I actually don't appreciate when you call me your child, like And I think it's important for the person to also express himself or herself, to change the dynamic, come with them, not at them. But if you're all quiet about it, you're also allowing it to happen.
You mentioned in there how to approach something like that. I think for a guy who, some guys are, kind of more trigger happy. They can be more blunt. They can be like a bull in a china shop. But I think it's also important not to be too soft either. But so
Yeah.
how do you strike that balance?
Um, Firm. Hey, this is important to me. Uh, Not only does it hurt me, but it's belittling to me. It's changing our dynamic. It's impacting our love, our relationship. Let's explore that. Like, I wonder how much of this you believe. I would keep it conversational, but firm. Meaning, if she's like, "Oh, I was just joking, get over it," then great. But no, I'm serious. So um, at the same time, I don't think you threaten people. I don't think make it a reaction. It has to be more of a response.
I agree with you, man. I want to pick something apart that you said because I think you course corrected on purpose, which I think is a very, which is one of the mistakes we made. You start to go down the line or start to go down the direction of like, hey, this makes me, and I think you're going to say feel, but versus, and you went back and you're like, no, wait a second, this has an impact on me. It has an
Mm.
impact on the relationship. Are you a firm believer in when you state feelings like, hey, if we say something like you make me feel or that makes me feel, do you think that it's better to word it differently?
I think it's important to express how something makes us feel, but I think it's important to distinguish what happened and how that makes me feel instead of you did this.
Right.
It's the pointed finger, it's the blaming, that then turns into this pattern of the other person then becomes offensive, and then people are just holding up shields, pointing fingers, and nothing gets resolved, right? So, of course, it's okay to say how something makes you feel, but that's different than saying you made me feel
You.
this way. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like this situation or this maybe statement,
Yes.
I feel
Yes.
this way has an
Yeah.
impact on me versus you make me feel terrible.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very subtle, but those are the things that are really important. I think that most people aren't kind of in tune with, and this is why, when they get into therapy, hopefully therapists kind of point out some of these things.
And speaking of therapy, I want to ask you a question about therapy. Um,
It's
you
all
know
it's
who,
all a scam. It's all a scam.
right?
Don't do
Yeah.
it.
We just want to keep you coming back. No,
Right.
uh, Chris, I think it's Wilkerson. I can't remember his name.
Mhm.
Just interviewed a gentleman. I think he's on TV. I don't know what show he's in because I have four kids and have no life outside of that. But he's got this really long beard. He wears a cowboy hat. Do you know what I'm talking about or no?
Is he?
No,
I don't know who he is.
I'd have to look him up. But he put this clip on that was, I'll be very honest, was kind of triggering to me.
Mm.
And that is, he said, the average man, the average real man, does not need to go to therapy. What
Oh,
he really
yeah.
needs, it gets better. What he really needs is for his wife and his kids to know and understand the battles that he faces, the burdens that he carries, and just to appreciate and respect him for that.
Oh, I know what you're talking
You know what
about.
I'm talking about?
Yeah, he's a little bit older. Has that
Yeah.
kind of like a cowboy kind
Right.
of yeah, yeah.
Which,
Um,
and I love that dude, but like that statement, I was like, no, no, I don't
yeah,
buy into that at all. In fact,
yeah.
I think that's horrendous, but that's just my opinion. What are your thoughts on that?
It sounds like some boomer talk. It sounds
Yeah.
like our parents.
That's,
Who are like, "Why
yeah.
you go to therapy if you're crazy?" You know, and
Yeah.
also, no, you don't need therapy. And I wonder how much therapy experience he's had. I think it's easy to say that. One of the misconceptions about therapy, it's not like just going into a room and talking about your feelings. You know, the relationship with your therapist can actually be healing. You know what I'm saying? So not even what's said, but like, let's say you grew up with no dad. Let's say you don't know what a man looks like, or let's say you're a woman who um, don't trust men. Then your therapist, male, because your therapist, hopefully is, has boundaries and is a safe space. That relationship is a corrective experience. So that has nothing to do with feelings. You know what I'm saying? It's an experience. And so that's also why your therapist, the chemistry between you and your therapist, it's really important. And it's also why, and this is my belief as a therapist who tends to show himself more, that I'm not just a cardboard cutout, that I'm a real person, and I'm not always right, and I've got issues of my own. Because then what you do is you form an authentic relationship with your client, and that relationship itself is corrective and healing, not just what we talk about on the surface.
I agree. I mean, I look at this and I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but I I think people go to personal trainers because of their expertise and their efficiency and
Mm-hmm.
effectiveness. And a client wants to say, hey, how can I leverage that type of environment where someone's going to push me? I don't necessarily have to come in with the mental bandwidth of wondering what I'm going to do. This
Right.
person literally can teach me things that I'm not doing today that I could be doing better. And that's welcoming, right? And I think for a guy, when it comes to therapy, I think it's extremely beneficial because it really
Yeah.
helps us understand, whatever it is that we've gone through, going through, whatever. But the really cool thing is the tools that we get to learn to to navigate then moving forward.
Yeah, and in one sentence, I mean, therapy is a lot of things, but it's mainly unearthing what's underneath, and you can't really do that by yourself. So when someone says you don't need therapy, your wife and kids or whatever, um, therapy is about processing where you realize things that you didn't know before because of the human exchange. What is running underneath that is unconscious. Your therapist will help you connect some dots, see things that you can't see because you're too close, right? Like, how is that not valuable? you know?
It's extremely valuable. I mean,
Yeah.
I've done therapy on and off for, gosh, probably 2.5 decades, and it's
Hmm.
always been beneficial to me. I'm always like, oh yeah, and there it is. It's right there in front of me.
Yeah.
Couldn't
Yeah.
see it before. As far as other signals go, you've definitely given us a few. Are there other ones that are maybe a little bit more elusive that we're like, wow, I didn't really see that one at all.
Yeah. The subtle, and you kind of touched upon this, the subtle character assassination, you know? Um, I think if you are, the way that we talk to each other, if you are assassinating one's character, um, even if it's slight, um, that's a huge sign. That's a signal. And also if you're used to your character being assassinated and you don't stick up for yourself, and you fall into a relationship where it's happening, um, it's emotional abuse, and it tears the relationship apart. It's a whole death by a thousand paper cuts.
Yeah,
So the way that you talk to someone, like what you just mentioned about the woman saying, "Yeah, he's my child," that could be kind of a subtle form of a character assassination.
I would say so because I mean, if you're viewed as a child, then you're not viewed as the roles that I think we play as men,
Hmm.
as being
Hmm.
a provider, a protector, a leader.
Yeah.
We're just sort of like we're one of the adolescents, or maybe even one of the toddlers.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Another signal, and this is huge, is the inability to repair rupture. All relationships, whether intimate or friendships, or even like with your boss, coworkers, it's rupture repair. It's rupture repair. And if people don't know how to repair the rupture, if people are just being defensive, pointing fingers, it's your fault, not taking any ownership, the relationship isn't good. It's just a matter of time, before it goes down. So to me, that's a huge signal in any relationship if one or both parties don't have the ability to repair ruptures. Because it's not about how many times we fight; it's about how we fight.
And can we talk about that, as
Yeah.
far as fighting goes? Because, we have two parts of our brain, right? Which is logic and emotion.
Hmm.
Not trying to oversimplify it, but when we're having an argument with our significant other, our partner, there's a tremendous amount of emotional triggering that happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how is it that we can stay like what is good conflict in your opinion?
It's when you, so this is the mantra for me. And listen, it takes reps. It's not something that I've mastered, but whenever I feel conflict, I say to myself, try to understand before trying to be understood. Try to understand before trying to be understood. Most of my life, I try to make my partner understand me first, be understood, and then tell me what you think. And I think that's dangerous. And I think that's when it becomes a courtroom and people are kind of like trying to prove, their right or their point. But if you try to understand before trying to be understood, it creates neutral soil. And when two people are doing that, it flips the magnet back. When people feel understood, they're less defensive. When people don't feel understood, unseen, unheard, they're going to defend because they're protecting themselves, right? So, in order to be vulnerable, in order to really have a conversation that's meaningful and heartfelt, people have to understand each other before trying to be understood. So
Do you
that's
think
one of my
that
tips.
I love that. But do you think most people get tripped up in like, well, if I share with this person that I understand them, does that mean I'm now welcome Matt and I'm agreeing with them? Like, am I suddenly making whatever happened okay if I understand it?
I mean, right. So I don't think it's about being a doormat. I don't think it's about winning or losing. A lot of people see fights as, the two people pulling the tug of war rope and the stronger person wins. And I think this is a generalization, but men come in with a lot of facts. Um, my wife is a therapist, and she had a session with a couple, and the guy came in, no joke, he came in with the presentation with slides, and it's like, she, and she, you can't laugh at your client, so she just took it in. But that's an example of someone coming in loaded, trying to prove something, and in this case, facts, data, like, and then you become very detached because that shows no effort of you trying to understand the other person. That's all you trying to win the court case.
Wow. So in a situation like that, where those are the dynamics, where the person is just simply trying to overpower the other person, this could be obviously the man's role or the woman's role, whatever it
Right,
is.
right.
How do we get that neutral soil if the other person in the relationship is like that?
Well, you gotta ask the other person who's sitting, absorbing this presentation, how this makes you feel, and the other person will probably say, yeah, like he's trying to prove something. He's not seeing me as a human being. He's coming in here, pitching the therapist to get you on his side. The person with a presentation, or the person that is, not connecting, not trying to understand, they have to see how their words, actions are impacting the relationship, how it's creating drift. A lot of people won't see that. A lot of people will argue. A lot of people don't want to look at it because it means that they have to do work. But then what are they bringing to the table other than defense?
Is there the story I'm telling myself I mean, this is all dependent on the relationship dynamics and how far down the road I'm sure we are and they are and that kind of thing. But if a person is in that position where they're just simply just trying to state their case over and over and over again, and we're just not getting through to them,
Yeah,
is there
that
any hope for that?
um well, the hope is that they're on a path of changing. If you don't see any change, I gotta be honest, I don't know how that can be a relationship.
Yeah.
And I used to be that person. I remember uh, when I was married before, arguing with my ex-wife about the the tint on the window, and she had very fair skin. And I said, yeah, you should just tint your window. And we started arguing about if tinted windows actually prevent the UV rays. And we argued for like an hour about this. She started crying. And I realized it wasn't about tinted windows. She just wanted to be heard. And I was just always defending or trying to win, you know? And so I don't know if you can build a relationship with anyone, friend, romantic, any kind of relationship, if the person is never taking ownership and is always defensive.
Mm.
So the hope is that they are being less defensive, that they are working on that, that they are aware of that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. Is there any way to, like, so for instance, I know you said earlier, the best way to lower defenses and get neutral soil, and by the way, I love that term, is to show the person that you understand them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And is there is there certain words that we should use that are more effective than others to just basically demonstrate, like, I understand where you're coming from. In fact, even validating what it is that they're feeling.
Yeah, and this might sound kind of strange, but actually saying, "Here's what I hear you saying," because that proves that you're understanding, right? Like here's what I hear you saying. You're saying that when I joke around and call you my child, that makes you feel like belittled, and that's what I hear you saying. So then, when you repeat what the other person and you clarify it, then you have just proven to your partner that you understand, you hear. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of a simple tool. A lot of therapists will do that in the room. You'll say something, and the therapist will say, "So here's what I hear you saying," and it will just validate you. You know, and just
Got it.
repeat what you said. You know.
Well, even as you said that, I mean, it's not like I'm sitting here putting myself in a position of a relationship, and if that was said back to me, I actually felt like almost this physiological response in me as you
Yeah,
said that,
yeah.
of like there was oxygen back in the room.
Yeah, and that's truth, man. That's it's a somatic thing where you're like, oh, okay. And I think what you're feeling is okay. I feel safer. I don't
Yeah,
have to defend. Oh, this person understands. We may not agree. There may be more to this conversation, but at least we're starting with this person sees me. This person sees something, pain, whatever it is. And I think that's the soil, right? That's the beginning.
that is. And then I do want to take this a step further because I think this is where maybe a few of us get kind of tripped up. It's like, okay, if I'm hearing you and if I understand you correctly, you're saying that when I introduce you to people we don't know as you're my fifth child, like that's probably very demeaning to you, right?
Hmm.
So we could use an example like that. We could use any other example, but what do we do when we say, hey, I understand where you're coming from, but we also don't agree with them? And that's where I think we might get tripped up in like, hey, for what I'm hearing you say is this, this, and this, but boom, boom, boom. And I think then do we kind of ruin it if we do that but and then go right into defense again?
I mean, I think it depends, but I would try to stay away from the word but. So I
Yeah,
would say, hey, I hear you. You know, when I call you my child, of course it's embarrassing for you. We're with other parents, and I understand that. And then what's people are going to want to say is but you never put away the dishes, right? And then it takes away what you just said. So instead of but, it's like then you get to express yourself, and then you can say and and I have been very frustrated in the last year because I make your bed every day, and you throw your dirty socks on the floor, and I am, I feel like the domestic labor is all upsetting, and I feel like I'm being your mom, and it's affecting our dynamic. So I would just use different words like the but instead of the but, say and. Even simple things like that really they go a long way. They help.
well, I mean, I had a reaction to both of those things as you were saying them. When you
Yeah.
said, but you never do the dishes, like I immediately wanted to, there was a part of me that just wanted to fight.
Yeah,
And then
because
when
like,
you,
let me show you the scoreboard, and let me show you what I do,
right.
then it becomes war. Yeah,
And I noticed when you said and then and then you're like, and it impacts our dynamics. Like
yeah.
that, while that was still hard for me to hear, I still felt like we were a bit on the same team.
That's you know what you
Yeah.
just nailed it. You just nailed it. If you can get to a place where you're pulling from, we're on the same team. This is not me versus you. If you could get to a place where this is us, we're in it together. How can we fix this? that's that's good. I mean, that's healthy. That's safe. That's making people feel like they don't have to defend for themselves. You know.
I love that, man. I love
Yeah.
that. Let me ask you this just as we wrap up, because I know we're a bit on a time crunch. But I did want to ask you about proactivity in relationships versus reactivity. So I'm sure
Mm,
you see this all the time, man, in your practice. And I get these 911s all the time too, where, hey, my wife just told me that she wants out. What do I do? Versus like, man, I wish we could have talked like 2 years ago. Like
right.
what is the stance? Like what is a good, if you were to give couples out there any advice around be extremely proactive with your relationship, and this is what it looks like versus reactive, and it might be too late.
Yeah, I feel like reactions come from emotion. Our feelings are valid, but that's we can't just pull from our feel. I mean, that's what 5-year-olds do, right? And so just throwing peas at the wall. So there needs to be a speed bump, and this requires reps and practice where you feel something, and then instead of reacting, instead of the knee jerk, you think about how your response, your actions, your words, you're showing up is going to impact the other person and also the relationship, something greater than yourself. And then you do everything you can to execute that. And I think if two people are doing that, it's going to be less explosive. It's going to be less toxic. It's going to be less people hurting each other and fighting unfair. There's going to be more honest conversations. It may be painful, but it won't be toxic. And people usually react when they get hurt. So it may be sad, but it won't be people pulling from a place of retaliation, if that makes sense. So um, always trying to respond instead of react. And it doesn't even have to be about one thing. Like even right now, I'm homeless, technically. we're just and so my reaction to this can be like my vices. Okay, well, I'm gonna go toward eating my feelings. That's a reaction, or I don't know, drugs, alcohol, sex, or whatever I can numb. That's a reaction. Or I could say, fuck this, I'm out, and like move out of the country. That may be a reaction. But a response is sitting with this and making decisions that's based on truth and something that's coming from solid self instead of a reaction from a feeling.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense, man. Well, your new book, like I said, by the way, when I first interviewed you a couple years ago, you know, I used to be a miserable F, and I was
Yeah.
like the angry therapist. I remember you getting that email. I was like, who is this guy? And then I interviewed you for the first time, and I loved
Yeah.
it. But you're like I said, your latest book, Break Up on Purpose, a catalyst for growth. Where can guys find the book, and then where can they find you and follow you?
Yeah, you can find me across social at the Angry Therapist, and the book is wide, so it's at Target. Target, the airport's just picked it up. It's on Amazon.
Nice, man.
It's Yeah, it's not just for people going through a breakup. It's anyone with breakup residue. We all have stuff from previous relationships that we may be carrying, or we may be comparing our current partner to old. So it kind of guides you and helps you through anything breakup related, not just if you're going through a breakup today.
So even like being proactive, like if your relationship
Yeah.
might be in a little bit of trouble, like this is a great book.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah,
a great conversation starter, and there's also tons of case studies and client stories. But yeah, for you and your partner to read it together and talk about other relationships can produce relationship glue or the current one, and how other breakups impact your relationship today. That's a really interesting conversation.
that's amazing, man. And
Yeah.
last question I have for you is, I mean, I know you probably can't talk about it, but is there another book after this?
Yes, there's another. I just turned it in. After I used to be miserable. The word that rhymes with duck. Um, I, I wrote a book called Single on Purpose, and that was kind of my most popular book. And so we're trying to brand the On Purpose. This one's called Break Up on Purpose, and the next one is going to be Love Hard on Purpose. So
Ooh,
um,
man.
that'll be the box set.
I love that, man. Very,
Yeah,
very good. Well, I'd love to have you back when that one launches, man.
awesome. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me. Yeah,
you
and
bet.
thank you for accommodating me during these circumstances.
Oh man, it's the least I could do. Shoot,
Yeah.
if I would have known you were homeless, I just would have flown you into the studio here. You get on this
Oh,
couch and I'll be on this mic, and that way you'd have a roof over your head right now.
yeah. Yeah. One day at a time.
That's
Appreciate it.
right. That's
All right.
right. All right, brother. Talk to you
All
soon.
right.